Good evening, America. I hope you're all buckled up and ready because tonight we've got a real treat for you. This isn't just any debate. Oh no, this is the heavyweight showdown you've been waiting for. In one corner, we have the man who claims to know more about real estate than anyone alive, Mr. I built towers and bankruptcies himself, Donald J. Trump. And in the other corner, the woman who's ready to move America into the 21st century, one affordable housing unit at a time, Vice President Kamala Harris, the former prosecutor who's probably wondering if she's going to have to file charges against any of these arguments tonight. Now, before we get into it, let me just say this. Housing is one of the most important issues facing America today. And I, for one, can't wait to see how these two candidates, both of whom have more opinions than Twitter on a bad day, plan to solve it. We're talking about everything from affordable housing to the homelessness crisis to, yes, how many gold-plated toilets you can fit into a penthouse. So get ready, because if you thought housing was just about bricks and mortar, you clearly haven't been paying attention to the kind of debates we've had in the past. Tonight, we're going to see if Kamala Harris can build a case for her housing plan without needing a hard hat, and if Donald Trump can convince us that real estate is best left to the experts, which, spoiler alert, he thinks is him. So sit back, relax, or maybe don't, because with these two, who knows what's going to happen. And let's dive into tonight's topic, housing, the one thing we all need but can't seem to agree on how to make affordable, accessible, or sometimes even livable. Let the debate begin, and may the best blueprint win. All right, Senator Harris, let's kick things off with a question that's probably more complicated than assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. We all know that affordable housing is about as easy to find as a parking spot in Manhattan. So tell us, what's your big plan? How are you going to increase the availability of affordable housing? And just to be clear, we're talking about real housing here, not some fantasy world where everyone gets a penthouse with a view of the Capitol. Are you planning to conjure up some magical housing fairy, or do you actually have a blueprint that won't require us all to mortgage our souls to get a roof over our heads?
Oh, you're right. Affordable housing is a bit like assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. Frustrating, complicated, and you're always left with a few extra pieces you have no idea what to do with. But fear not. We've got a plan that's more solid than an Allen wrench and won't require a magical housing fairy. First off, let's talk funding. We're advocating for increased federal funding for affordable housing projects. Think of it as building the foundation for a house, not glamorous, but absolutely essential. More funding means more homes, and more homes mean fewer people struggling to find a place to live. It's pretty straightforward. Next, we're looking at tax incentives for developers. Now, I know what you're thinking: tax incentives? Aren't those just for big corporations and yacht owners? Not in this case. These incentives are designed to encourage developers to build affordable housing, not just luxury condos with rooftop pools. It's about turning that penthouse fantasy into a reality for more people without the Capitol View price tag. And let's not forget about expanding housing programs like Section 8. These programs have helped countless families find stable housing, but they need more support and modernization. By increasing funding and improving efficiency, we can ensure more families have access to safe, affordable housing. It's like upgrading your IKEA bookshelf to one that actually holds all your books. So no, we're not conjuring up a magical housing fairy, though that would be fantastic. We're rolling up our sleeves and getting to work with real, actionable blueprints. It's about using smart policy and strategic investments to make sure everyone has a place to call home. Because in America, having a roof over your head shouldn't be a luxury, it should be a basic right. And trust me, no soul mortgaging required. All right, President Trump, let's get down to brass tacks, or in your case, maybe it's gold-plated tax. We all know affordable housing is scarcer than a tweet-free day from you. So I have to ask, what specific measures will you take to increase the availability of affordable housing? Are you planning to build a new Trump Tower for the 99%? Or maybe you've got a secret plan to turn all those golf courses into affordable housing developments. Because we're dying to hear how you'll transform your real estate magic from luxury hotels to homes that regular folks can actually afford. Lay it on us, Mr. President. No gold leaf fantasy, just the real deal.
Well, Kamala, it's great to see you here talking about affordable housing, such an important issue. And let me just say, nobody does housing better than I do. Nobody. I've built some of the most luxurious buildings in the world. Trump Towers, Trump Hotels, Trump everything. But I get it. We need housing that regular folks can afford. So here's the plan. And it's a tremendous plan. Believe me. First, we're going to cut those pesky regulations that are strangling our builders. You know the ones. Zoning laws, environmental rules, all that red tape that makes it harder to build than to win the presidency. We cut those regulations and boom, the private sector can start building like never before. We're talking about a housing boom that will make the 1980s look like a warm-up act. And Kamala, you might like this part. We're going to use market-based solutions. No need for the government to get its hands dirty. We let the developers do what they do best. Build, build, build. They know how to create supply. And when the supply goes up, prices come down. It's basic economics. Even a kindergartner running a lemonade stand knows that. Now, about those golf courses, nice try, but we're not turning those into housing developments. Golf courses are where deals get made, but we've got plenty of other places where we can build. And when we do, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be tremendous, and it's going to be affordable. So, Kamala, while you're busy figuring out how to tax everything that moves, I'll be out there making sure every American has a place to live. And it won't just be a roof over their head. It'll be a Trump-quality roof. Thank you, and you're welcome. Well, Kamala, I've got a question for you. We all know you've got a big heart. You're always talking about helping people, especially low-income families. So tell us, how do you plan to support these families in securing stable housing? Are we talking about some government program that'll have more paperwork than a law school final? Or maybe you're planning to have Joe Biden personally deliver the keys to every new home. Because here's the thing, Kamala, stable housing isn't just about building more places to live. It's about making sure people can actually afford to stay in them. So what's your grand plan? Are you going to put rent controls on the moon? Or maybe you're thinking of a new tax to make sure everyone can pay their rent. With a little left over for the government, of course. And don't get me started on those housing vouchers. Sounds nice, but let's be real. Are they going to be worth more than monopoly money by the time they get through all that Washington red tape? So, what's it going to be, Kamala? I'm dying to hear how you're going to make this housing dream come true without turning it into a bureaucratic nightmare.
Oh, President Trump, it's always a delight to hear your vivid imagination at work. I can picture it now, Joe Biden hand-delivering keys like he's Santa Claus on a housing mission. But let's get real. Stable housing isn't about fairy tales. It's about solid, actionable plans that actually make a difference. First off, let's talk about rental assistance programs. We're expanding these programs because, newsflash, they work. More funding means more families getting the help they need to keep a roof over their heads. And no, it won't involve more paperwork than a law school final. We're cutting through the red tape to make these programs accessible and efficient. Imagine that, a government program that actually works smoothly. It's not a unicorn, I promise. Now, on to housing vouchers. We're increasing funding for these too because housing vouchers aren't monopoly money, they're lifelines. We're talking real value, real support. By increasing the funding, we ensure that families can find and afford decent housing. It's like upgrading from Baltic Avenue to a nice spot on Marvin Gardens without the skyrocketing rent. And here's the kicker: direct subsidies to low-income families. Yes, you heard that right. We're putting money directly into the hands of those who need it most. This isn't about creating some bureaucratic nightmare. It's about giving families the financial support to secure stable housing and maintain it. So no, we're not putting rent controls on the moon, though that does sound like a fun Space Force project. We're focused on Earth, right here, right now, making real changes that matter. It's about using smart policies and targeted funding to ensure everyone has a fair shot at stable housing. So, Mr. President, while you might be dreaming up gold-plated solutions, we're here in the real world, rolling up our sleeves and getting the job done. Because in the end, it's not about the fantasy. It's about delivering real results for real people. And that's exactly what we're going to do. All right, President Trump, since we're in the spirit of asking the tough questions, let's flip this around. You've been known for your real estate empire, but let's talk about your plan for affordable housing. You say it's not just about building more places, but making sure people can afford to stay in them. So, what's your grand strategy here? Are you going to offer Trump-branded affordable housing where everyone gets a golden doorknob? Or maybe you've got a secret plan to turn Mar-a-Lago into a giant affordable housing complex. How exactly do you plan to support low-income families without turning the whole process into a bureaucratic nightmare? Or, worse, a bad episode of The Apprentices? We're dying to know, will your plan involve more than just flashy rhetoric and empty promises? Because while you're busy painting these grand visions, real Americans need real solutions. So, Mr. President, what's your actual blueprint for making affordable housing a reality without it being just another shiny fad? Lay it out for us, and please, no monopoly metaphors this time. Comprehensive approach including increased funding for homeless shelters, mental health services, and affordable housing. So, President Trump, now that we've laid out a real plan, I'm curious about your take. You've highlighted the issue and thrown out some colorful ideas, but what's your actual strategy to address homelessness? Are you planning to turn your golf resorts into shelters? Or maybe you've got another grand vision up your sleeve? Because we're all ears and waiting to hear how you plan to tackle this crisis without turning it into another episode of The Trump Show. Let's hear your big idea. Strong enforcement of fair housing laws, funding for fair housing organizations, and policies to combat discrimination in housing. Now, Mr. President, you've asked a great question about fair housing practices. So let's hear your take. How do you plan to prevent discrimination and ensure that everyone gets a fair shot at the American dream, no matter who they are or where they come from? Because we're all interested in hearing your specific measures to address this crucial issue without just waving it away like it's another episode of reality TV. What's your game plan? Advocacy for strong federal-state partnerships with significant federal investment and oversight. Now, Mr. President, you've brought up an important point about the role of federal and local partnerships in solving the affordable housing crisis. I'm curious to hear your view. How do you plan to partner with state and local governments to effectively address this issue? Are you ready to roll up your sleeves and work together with the folks on the ground, or do you have another big idea up your sleeve? Let's hear your strategy.
Well, Kamala, you've got quite the imagination there. Trump-branded affordable housing with golden doorknobs. I'll tell you, that's not a bad idea. But let's keep it real for a minute. You want to know my plan? It's simple, it's smart, and it's going to work. Just like everything else I've done, believe me. First of all, forget about turning Mar-a-Lago into a housing complex. That place is staying exactly where it is, as a little slice of paradise. But here's the thing, I don't need to turn my properties into affordable housing because I'm going to do something even better. I'm going to focus on economic policies that actually help people make enough money so they can afford housing on their own. You see, it's not about giving everyone a handout. It's about giving them a hand up. We're going to create jobs, lots of them, and good-paying jobs, not just flipping burgers, unless they're Trump burgers, which would be the best burgers, of course. We're talking about bringing manufacturing back, boosting small businesses, cutting those taxes I love to cut, and letting the American people keep more of their hard-earned money. That way, they don't need government subsidies or housing vouchers. They can pay for their homes with their own two hands. Self-sufficiency, Kamala, that's the name of the game. And let's not forget, when the economy is booming, and it will be booming under my watch, people don't just find jobs, they find better jobs. They move up, they make more, and pretty soon, they're not just paying the rent, they're buying the whole building. So, Kamala, while you're busy dreaming up new government programs, I'm out here making sure Americans have the opportunity to succeed on their own. That's my blueprint, and it's going to be a real game changer. No empty promises, no bureaucratic mess, just good old-fashioned American success. And hey, if you're really lucky, maybe you'll get a golden doorknob after all. Well, Kamala, since we're on the topic of housing, let me ask you something that's been on everyone's mind. What's your big strategy to address homelessness in America? Because let me tell you, it's a huge issue. And it's not just about handing out tents and calling it a day. Are you planning to build a bunch of government-run shelters that look more like luxury hotels, except without the room service, of course? Or maybe you've got a plan to just house everyone in the basements of those fancy government buildings over in D.C. Seriously, though, what's the game plan here? Are you going to create a new task force, form another committee, or maybe just throw money at the problem and hope it sticks? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the real solution is helping people get back on their feet, not just giving them a place to crash. So, Kamala, what's the real deal? How are you going to tackle this crisis without turning every city into a permanent camping ground? We're all ears. Let's hear your big idea. Well, Kamala, I'm glad you asked, because I've got a plan that's not just big, it's huge. And it doesn't involve turning my golf resorts into shelters, although I have to say, that would be one luxurious experience. But seriously, here's the thing. Homelessness is a complex issue, and it's not going to be solved by some one-size-fits-all government program. That's why my strategy is all about local solutions, because the people who know how to fix their communities best are the ones living in them. I'm talking about supporting local governments, getting charitable organizations involved, and you know who else? Faith-based initiatives. These groups are out there every day doing incredible work, and they know what it takes to make a real difference. We'll give them the support they need, some federal backing, but without all the strings and red tape. We don't need Washington dictating how to solve homelessness from 1,000 miles away. Let's empower the people who are on the ground, making real change happen. And you know what? It's not just about giving people a place to stay. It's about helping them get back on their feet. That means job training, mental health services, and yes, a little bit of tough love when it's needed. We're going to make sure these folks have the tools to succeed, not just survive. And trust me, Kamala, this isn't going to be another episode of The Trump Show. It's going to be the real deal. And it's going to work. But now, let me turn it back to you. We've talked a lot about building housing and helping people find a place to live, but how are you going to ensure fair housing practices? What's your plan to prevent discrimination and make sure everyone gets a fair shot at the American dream, no matter who they are or where they come from? Because that's a big issue too. And I'm curious to hear what you've got up your sleeve. Well, Kamala, that's a great question. Fair housing practices, making sure everyone gets a fair shot at the American dream. And let me tell you, I'm all about the American dream. But here's the thing, we already have strong legal frameworks in place to prevent discrimination. We've got laws, we've got regulations, and they're there to make sure that nobody's getting pushed out just because of who they are. So my plan? It's simple. Enforce the laws we already have and make sure they're working as they should. We don't need a whole new stack of regulations just to show we're doing something. Too much regulation, and pretty soon you can't build a doghouse without getting government approval. Now, I'm also a big believer in personal responsibility. We need to make sure that people are doing their part too. That means landlords, tenants, everybody needs to play by the rules. And when they don't, well, that's where local governance comes in. Let the local authorities handle it, because they know their communities better than anyone in Washington ever could. And by the way, Kamala, I don't just wave things away like it's reality TV, okay? I know this is real life, and real people are counting on us to get this right. So that's my game plan. Use the tools we've got, make sure they're working, and let local governments take the lead. It's about being smart, not just doing more for the sake of it. But while we're talking about solutions, let me ask you this. What role do you see for the federal government in partnering with local and state governments to solve the affordable housing crisis? Because we can't just sit back and expect Washington to solve everything, right? So how are you going to work with the folks on the ground to really get this done? I'm all ears. Donald Trump, as imagined by Andy Borowitz. Well, Kamala, you hit the nail on the head. Partnerships are key. But let's get one thing straight. I'm all about giving power back to the states. You see, I believe in letting the local and state governments take the lead because they know what their communities need better than anyone sitting in D.C. ever could. My strategy is simple. The federal government should be more like a good neighbor, ready to lend a hand when needed, but not barging in and telling you how to run your household. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for rolling up my sleeves and getting to work, but let's be real. Housing issues in New York aren't the same as in Texas or California. So why should Washington have a one-size-fits-all solution? My plan is to give states more autonomy to address their specific housing challenges. We'll provide support, sure, but we're not going to micromanage. We're going to make it easier for states to get things done without jumping through federal hoops. And let's talk about innovation. We'll encourage states to come up with creative solutions, whether it's through public-private partnerships, zoning reforms, or other initiatives that make sense for them. And when they succeed, we'll highlight those successes and let other states learn from them. It's about creating a competitive environment where the best ideas rise to the top, not pushing a federal agenda down everyone's throat. So, Kamala, while you might want to have Washington running the show, I'm going to trust the folks on the ground. That's my strategy. Less interference, more empowerment. And believe me, when the states have the freedom to do what they do best, we'll see real results. Now, what's your take on that?
Well, folks, I think we've all had quite the show tonight. We've covered a lot of ground, from golden doorknobs to creative zoning and everything in between. But it looks like we're just getting warmed up, and I know you don't want to miss what's coming next. Unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight. But don't worry, the debate isn't over yet. Tomorrow night, we'll dive right back into the thick of it with some of the biggest questions still left on the table. We'll be asking our candidates to tackle the rising cost of rent in major cities, something that's pinching everyone's wallet, and how they plan to incentivize private developers to actually build affordable housing instead of just another high-rise for the super rich. So, Mr. Trump, Madam Vice President, you've got some homework to do because the American people want answers, and we'll be right here to make sure they get them. To everyone watching at home, thank you for joining us tonight. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, share this debate with your friends, and set your reminders for tomorrow's showdown. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. We'll see you right back here for round 2. Until then, good night and get ready for more fireworks.